Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Jorge Rodriguez. I'm the Associate Director of the Hispanic Summer Program, and I'm so excited to have you here. For those who are new to our organization, the HSP is a year-round 501c3 nonprofit that creates programming that supports the development of Latinx theological leaders. So we do that through supporting students, through supporting faculty, staff, and administrators across a variety of programs, including programs where you can earn 3 graduate credits towards your graduate degree at a school in the United States or abroad. I'm very excited to have you all here for our HSP Exchange, our monthly public scholarship series, where we welcome a different scholar to speak about their work and its importance to the world, and particularly to the Latinx community. Before I start, I want to do a special announcement. As some of you know, we were hiring for quite some time, and we finally made some hires. And so I'm happy to welcome, for the first time, some are here, some are not, the HSP Fellows. The HSP Fellows program is a new program that we developed to provide master's level students an opportunity to learn new skills in nonprofit management and administration. And we were able to welcome 3 fellows to join us for the year. Among them are Leslie Martinez of Union Theological Seminary, who's joining us as the Marketing and Communications Fellow. Adrian Bruder, who I see is here from Drew University, who's joining us as the Development and Donor Relations Fellow, as well as Yvette Valenzuela from Duke University, who's joining us as the Development and Fundraising Research Fellow. So I'm very excited to have them join the HSP Auxiliary team, which also includes Amanda Bolaños, our HCI intern, as well as our consultant for social media and graphics, who is Yadi Martinez Reina. So thank you all. You'll hear more about them in a few weeks as we send an announcement out to our community. But we wanted to announce them and welcome them to the HSP staff here first. Without further ado, I want to first thank our co-host for tonight, Palmer Theological Seminary of Eastern University. Dean Kimberly Johnson is here, representing the institution as well. And we're so grateful that Palmer has been able to partner with us in this way, not just to promote the HSP Exchange, but also to serve as a sponsoring school for several years. So thank you, Palmer, for helping come alongside us as we welcome Dr. Mayra Picos-Lee. Dr. Mayra Picos-Lee is the senior lecturer in counseling and the director of the MTS in Latino Ministries at Palmer Theological Seminary. But in addition to her work at Palmer, she is also the chair of the executive committee of the HSP board. And this summer, she's going to be teaching a course called Migration, Displacement, and Trauma in Latinx Communities, a bilingual course at the HSP summer session. Some of you who are here might already be enrolled in that course. And if not, even if you were not able to register and apply this year to the HSP summer session, we teach courses like this year round. In the J term, we'll have another course that will be announced soon, and we'll have more courses next year in the summer session. So don't miss out to learn with people like Dr. Picos-Lee. So without further ado, Dr. Picos-Lee, thank you so much for being with us today. And please join me in welcoming her talk, Migration, Resilience, and Trauma.
Thank you so much, Jorge, for that warm welcome. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's a little strange. I was talking to Jorge just a few minutes before we got started and saying it's really hard for me not being able to see all your faces. So I have 2 devices connected here in an attempt to be able to connect with you. Especially when we are going to be talking about such a personal topic, but you understand the limitations of having to share a screen and then trying to see people's faces and interact with you. So I will do my best. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you all tonight. I must say I'm connecting from a faraway place. I think it's appropriate for the topic we're going to be discussing. Right now, I'm in Brazil. I don't live in Brazil. I'm not Brazilian. I was born and raised in Mexico. So I'm an immigrant myself, but I'm here fulfilling some duties with the program that I'm directing. So I'm in a city known as Valinhos, which is like an hour away from Sao Paulo. I'm happy to be here and happy to reflect on this topic from, all the way from South America and connecting to people all the way in the US and maybe in other places as well. I'm also wanting to say thank you to my dean, Dr. Johnson, for allowing me the time and the space to participate in such an event and in the HSP Exchange and also in the HSP Summer Program. And for affirming the commitment to Latino communities and ministries in this way. Asked to share about the class and the topic that I'm going to be presenting this summer. And I was trying to remember, I think my class may have a slightly different title from the title of my presentation tonight, but it's on the lines of migration, resilience, and trauma. And, let me begin by saying that part of my impulse to speak about migration, resilience, and trauma comes from my own life experience. Maybe this research and this reflection is in some ways autobiographical, try to express some of what my experience has been. I have lived in the US for over 20 years, most of my adult life and my professional life involved in theological education. But I was born and raised in Mexico and completed my studies there all the way to university. And my family, meaning siblings, parents, aunts, uncles, still reside in Mexico for the most part, though I have some family living in the US as well. So this is to say that I have had to live my life with one foot in the US and one foot in Mexico. And now by way of, participating and directing this program that Jorge mentioned, I get to travel to different places in Latin America, including Mexico. So last week I was in Mexico and now I'm in Brazil. And that fills my heart because it allowed me to fulfill some of what I feel is my vocation. It allows me to make sense of my experience as a migrant myself and to be involved in theological education, not only with Latino communities and non-Latino communities in the US, but in other places of Latin America as well. So having said that, I want to share with you a few reflections. I was told that I have around 20 minutes. I will try to be faithful to the time allowed, and then I will take some questions and comments that you want to make in response to my presentation. So these are a few thoughts that are going to try to present to you some of what I hope to accomplish throughout my course this summer and some of my own observations and research on the topic of migration, resilience, and trauma. So I'm going to start with a quote that I came across, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. Maybe some of you recognize the quote. And it brought tears to my eyes the first time I read this quote. So it comes from Paulo Freire. And let me move your faces to this side so I can see I can read the screen. So the quote reads, beginning of quote, "No one leaves his or her world without having been transfixed by its roots or with a vacuum for a soul. We carry with us the memory of the many fabrics as self-soaked in our history, our culture. A memory sometimes scattered, sometimes sharp and clear, of the streets of our childhood." End of quote. So that's Paulo Freire in Pedagogy of Hope, Reliving Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I came across this quote a few years after I have moved in the US. And I remember at the time, there was a big political upheaval over immigration because it was an election year coming up. I don't think that was the election year, but maybe the election year was coming the following year. As such, you know that one of the favorite topics of politicians is the topic of migration reform and migration and the role of migrants and all this. And so I remember beginning my teaching career at the time, and also, trying to maneuver this whole political conversation with my own experience as an immigrant or migrant, an immigrant trying to teach theological education, and trying to reconcile what I was hearing about migrants to what my experience was about immigration to what I was trying to study and do in terms of leaving my mark in this field of study. And it brought tears to my eyes because every so often, but at that time particularly, I was in a time of transition, and every time I have had one of those points of no return in my own, professional and personal journey, memories of my childhood, and especially memories of my decision to leave Mexico to come to the US, which was out of my own choice, come to mind, and the turmoil and the emotional struggle that such a decision evoked in me and my family. It's something that I have had to revisit, every so often for many years, to make sense of it and to reconcile with painful aspects of this decision. So when we talk about, there are many things that we can say about migration, but let me share a few that are relevant to the topic that I want to reflect on today. So on the one hand, we know migration has been a central aspect of Latinx experiences throughout history. Many immigrants, especially into the US, come from Latin America, Mexico, Central America, South America. Now we are hearing about, immigration policies being revisited again in terms of asylum seekers coming from specific countries. We know that the whole conversation about immigration has been highly politicized, and things change back and forth depending on who is on power, what party is ruling, and what things are happening not only in the US but in other countries as well. The other important aspect of this conversation is that migration has influenced our sense of identity. And when I speak of our sense of identity, I speak of myself as a member of the Latinx community, a migrant myself. And so it has influenced our sense of identity and cultural values. I do remember living in the US the first few times, and I have this vivid memory of people, the question people ask you as soon as they realize you have an accent, they ask you, where are you from? So I will say, I'm from Mexico, to which people often reply, oh, you are Hispanic. Or they will say, you are Latina. And I will reply, I'm Mexican. So for the longest time, we will go back and forth, I'm Mexican, and they will say, you're Latina, you're Hispanic, or you're this or that. And I resisted this sense of self-imposed labels, or not self-imposed labels, people impose of me to try to recognize my own particularity as a Mexican, until I finally gave up and I say, yes, I'm a Hispanic or I'm a Latina. So having to revisit my sense of identity and the ways people define me and the ways I wanted to be defined, and to struggle with these definitions and labels and identity. I know it's not particular, it's a particular piece of my own history, but it's something that happens to many other migrants in terms of how our identities and cultural identities shape and develop through migration journeys. Then the other thing to recognize about migration is that migration occurs, or immigration into the US particularly occurs for a variety of reasons. Some people choose to migrate. In my case, I chose to migrate because of studies. Some people choose to migrate because of educational opportunities, work opportunities, business. Some people are forced into migration due to dire circumstances in their countries of origin, due to poverty, due to war, displacement, many reasons. And yet most migrants will say that there is a wide gap between what they have hoped for to encounter, their dreams and wishes, and what they actually encounter in reality, right? So it's like having to maneuver the reality between what you encounter once you migrate and what you have hoped for is just part of the migration story. And lastly, as I have mentioned, migration brings into question our sense of self and a significant aspect of our cultural identity. So from this, I want to jump into this whole idea of cultural identity. So how does culture has anything to do with our sense of self or identity? Well, a culture influences the development of a person's identity, of an individual's identity. Identity formation begins since the time we are born at birth, with first mental images of the body and expands throughout time to more complex and differentiated images of self and others. So we are always being influenced by our surroundings, and not only in terms of relationships that we may have to people around us, but what we are exposed to in terms of sounds, in terms of visual images, to give meaning and to locate ourselves in a specific context, which I hear this is what Paulo Freire is alluding on this quote. So let's do a little bit of an exercise to get you to interact with me a little bit here. And I have some images I want to share with you. If any one of you recognize any of these images, would you please put something on the chat and name what you are seeing or what you recognize on the chat, and see how many we can name. And I may need your help, Amanda, to read to me what people are writing on the chat, I will think, but let's try this and see how it goes. So here we go. If you recognize the image, then let me know what you're seeing. It's a little small, but I hope that you can see it enough. So a couple of people saying prone. There is one that says
un coquí, a tree
un
frog, a tree on a frog on a leaf, a frog.
Yeah, and the right answer is it's a coquí from Puerto Rico. At least that's what I was promised when I look at the image. Here we go. What are you seeing?
A Buddha statue, a Maya god, una estatua azteca, a stone carving, Olmec head.
Right, and the right answer is it's an Olmec head. There are several of these big heads. We call them big heads in Mexico. They're part of our Mexican heritage and culture. And so they are located in different places, but some of them, I think this one in particular, is found in a museum in Veracruz, which is one of the towns alongside the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, here we go, one more.
Neymar.
Wow.
A soccer player.
That's true. So this is Neymar. We just finished with the World Cup that was played over Christmas. So this is Neymar, a big important figure here in Brazil, who is playing in Europe. I think he plays for a team in France nowadays. Next.
A frog.
Pupusas.
Yeah, good. Pupusas. These are pupusas salvadoreñas. Right. That should be easy for some of you.
New York.
There you go. Manhattan, right?
Mariachis.
Right. A mariachi band. Right. A mariachi band. We can name the flag.
I think all our Dominican folks shouted it out very quickly.
Yeah, right. Dominican Republic. This one. How many recognize this one?
El Chavo del
Yeah, it's actually Chapulín Colorado, but it's part of the Chavo del Ocho series. As one of the characters is known as the Chapulín Colorado. Y ahora quién podrá defenderme? Right.
The Liberty Bell.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I put 2, but yeah. Yeah, the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, right?
Y Miramar.
And then the last one, well, it says Miramar, I know. But where is that, if anyone knows? I don't expect many people to know this one, actually. But Miramar is my home. Pardon me?
Florida.
No, it's not Florida. It's Mexico, and it's actually the Gulf of Mexico, so it has something in common with Florida. But this is the inside part of the Gulf. This is my hometown, Tampico. It's a port in the Gulf of Mexico, and this is this is the beach that we have there. It's the name of the beach is Miramar. So I didn't expect anyone but to know this unless there was someone else who was Mexican and had been in Tampico. All right. So what about these images? I mean, I'm glad that we, in all together, we were able to name them all. And this is probably because these images, some of them, or maybe all of them, represent, or we have been exposed to them as part of our cultural heritage. Maybe some of them are more peripheral, tangential, because we weren't born with these images or meanings, but we have acquired them through our lifetime. Now, I did think about putting images that were kind of from far away places, and I imagine, we may struggle more to recognize them. But who knows? Maybe not. Nowadays, people travel, people migrate, we are exposed to cultures. We are exposed to symbolisms and to images from all sorts of places around the world. But the point here is most of these images, I mean, at least for me, they are part of my cultural identity. Somehow I have been exposed to them throughout my lifetime. Some of them are closer to me, especially the ones that are linked to Mexico. But generally, I have some I can name them, I can recognize them, and because they form part of my cultural identity. About a month ago or 2 months ago, Dean Johnson will remember this. We were in a faculty meeting and we were playing a game on Zoom, and people were putting images of different things and asking people to name the image, something similar to what you're seeing now. And there was an image that nobody was able to name because it was Evita Perón, but I did. I was the only one who was able to recognize that image. Of course, all my colleagues are non-Latinos, and they name different people, but I knew that it was Evita because I have been to Argentina and I've seen movies and I have read books. So that just came to show. That was the only image, by the way, that I recognized. All the others were kind of foreign to me, so I was proud of myself, and it kind of came to speak to cultural identity and cultural histories. So again, this idea of a culture is integrated by physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual images of self and others that occur within a specific context, and it becomes integrated in a person's identity formation. So what happens when we suffer separation and loss? How does that impact cultural identity, especially when we talk about this topic of immigration or migration? Well, attachment theory, which is one of the counseling models, one of the core beliefs of attachment theory is comes from this quote by Johnson and Withen. And beginning of quote: seeking and maintaining contact with significant others is an innate primary motivating principle in human beings across the lifespan. We all need contact with significant people, loved ones, with attachment figures, and with symbols to be able to grow and develop. And not only grow and develop, but especially to thrive under difficult or dire circumstances. Right? The comfort that the security figures provide is crucial to our development and sense of self. And that's the reason, I mean, this is the reason that explains why when we are in danger or something happens to us, we feel the urge to call people who are far away and can do nothing for us physically cannot intervene in this situation, just to hear their voice, right? It has an effect on our mental and emotional well-being. It allows us to calm down, to find some level of comfort and maybe to brainstorm a little bit as to what we need to do. But if you think this from a logical point of view, it makes no sense. Better to call 911, right? Or do something with someone who is near to us. And yet the urge of most of us when we feel in danger or under a threat is to try to reach out to loved ones, because seeking and maintaining contact with significant people is a primary motivating principle. So when we are separated, when separation occurs from attachment figures and symbols, there is a sense of loss and isolation that we experience. And this we call cultural relocation, right? You have their picture from the border with Tijuana. So the move from one culture, one's culture of origin into a new culture is experienced as a loss. It creates anxiety at the separation from people, not only from people, but from images, from symbols, from values that are crucial in providing roots, in grounding oneself, and in creating meaning. So cultural relocation, it's difficult, not only because it brings about a sense of separation, but because it calls into question a fundamental aspect of a person's identity. Who am I now, right? This is what I do recall, in this wrestling with the labels that were applied to me as opposed to the labels that I wanted to use to define myself. Who am I now? Am I Mexican? Am I Hispanic? Am I Latina? Who am I now in this new context? So as a result of this process of cultural relocation, and we can also say it's cultural dislocation. Dislocation precedes relocation. People have to engage in a process of cultural relocation that involves two movements. The first one is a grieving process and expression of the loss and separation. And the second one is a process of cultural negotiation and integration. Now, it'd be nice if these two things happen in an orderly fashion. You grieve, you express your sense of distress and disorientation, and then you reorient yourself, and then you proceed to a sense of cultural negotiation and integration. And maybe in a general sense, they do happen in that kind of way, but grief is such that it comes and goes in waves. If you have ever been through a process of grief over a significant loss in your life, you know what I'm talking about, right? You seem to grieve, and then you come to a sense of feeling grounded, and then you grieve some more, and then you come to a sense of being a little bit grounded, and then you grieve some more. So it comes and goes in waves. And this is to say that this process of grieving and negotiating who you are in this new culture and trying to integrate new threads of your story, of your journey, comes and goes in phases. And we have to revisit it throughout our lifetime. So let's just think for a second about grieving. Grieving is, in simple terms, grieving is the expression of a loss. We grieve because we have lost something, right? It's an expression of pain. It's an expression of distress. To me, it's an expression of love. If we don't love, we don't have to grieve because there is no pain, right? And if you have ever experienced, again, a significant loss, you know what I'm talking about. You cry, you express distress, you feel a vacuum in your soul, you feel a vacuum in your life because there is love, there is attachment, there is a sense of significance, an identity that derives from the relationship that you find yourself losing right now. So in that sense, grieving, when we think about the immigrant journey and expressions of grieving, they're an expression of love. Maybe nobody died in a physical sense, but part of us may feel like we have experienced some sort of a death, who we are and the proximity and the relationships and the social network that we have cultivated, maybe lost, maybe not, maybe lost in the sense or in the way that we used to have it, and it may be reshaping in a new way, because now we have to find ways of maintaining relationships at a distance, or with different kinds of challenges. So it's an expression of loss. Something has been lost, or something is changing, something is transitioning, and it creates a sense of mourning and a fear to the unknown. Now, we all grieve. Not all of us grieve in the same way. Not all of us express grief with the same emotions. Some people get mad, some people get sad, some people get numb, some people engage in grieving, some people try to block out the grieving and the expression of the emotion. But the ability to properly mourn the losses that a person experiences through cultural separations, it's going to be influenced by various factors. So here I'm naming a few: people's own personal history, previous experiences that you have with a loss, the closeness of relationships that you're losing, the circumstances in which the loss may have occurred. Is not the same when you are moving or you are migrating or you are losing something in a way that was planned, and you have the opportunity to process the transition and the opportunity for the community to process the transition with you, as opposed as the number of migrants that are coming by the thousands because they are running away from difficult circumstances, and sometimes they are escaping. So there is no planning, or maybe there is some planning, but there is no time to say goodbye or time to get together with the community and figure out what's going to happen. So all these factors and more are going to influence our expression of grieving in terms of the losses that we encounter as we move, as we migrate. Then a second movement, as I mentioned, is this sense of integration and cultural negotiation. Here I have the Duchamp syndrome. This is a play that I watched maybe about 2 weeks ago. I was in Mexico City, and I was invited to see a play. I had no idea what the play was about. Someone gave me a free ticket, and I went just to discover that it was the story. It's a play written by Antonio Vega. Let me read what I wrote here. The Duchamp syndrome is a play written by Antonio Vega, which tells the story of Juan, a Mexican immigrant who lives in New York City and dreams of becoming a successful stand-up comedian while he works as a custodian for a comedy club. The play describes Juan's internal life as he struggles to reconcile who he is as an immigrant in this new context and what people think of him, to who he has been while growing up in Mexico and aspires to become. Juan shares his life story with his friends, who are fictional characters born out of his imagination that help him navigate his sense of loneliness and disconnection. At the end of the play, and to the extent that Juan is better able to integrate the various threads of his life journey into a more cohesive and unifying narrative, his sense of self and ability to be more present to his struggles and opportunities begins to unfold. It turned out to be a play about immigration. I have no idea. And it was a wonderful play. It's a monologue, and not for the most part. It's a monologue, but there are these characters, friends of Juan. One of them is a rat, and the other is a cockroach, and then the other is Juan's own shadow. So he kind of, speaks to them, and somewhere along the play, you understand they are creatures of his imagination, and it's this is really Juan talking to himself and trying to make sense of his experience as a migrant and his wishes for what he wants to become, and then his recollection of his childhood in Mexico. Now the other character in this play that is you don't see in the plays, but you hear her voice, is Juan's mother. So Juan has a mother, the father is deceased, and the mother wants to come and see his success because he keeps telling his mother that he's very successful and all these people, are applauding his performances as a comedian. Now, the mother is not able to come to the US because the mother cannot get a visa. They are poor people living in Guadalajara, Mexico. And also she's blind until, and after much persistence, she's able to gain access to a visa. And all of a sudden, Juan knows that she's coming to see him. Of course, she cannot see him physically. So, then he's in this dilemma of wanting to see his mother again, but not wanting his mother to come, because then how is he going to, sustain the life? At the end of the day, he manages to bring the mother, and it puts on a show, since the mother is blind, makes noises and all sorts of things to pretend that the mother is coming into this comedy club, and not the warehouse that is at the back of the comedy club, where he works into doing cleaning stuff. The mother leaves pretending to think that she believes in Juan's success, just to realize later on that the mother may be blind physically, but she's not blind in other ways. At some point in the play, she lets Juan know that whatever it is that he's doing, and she does believe that he's successful, and she's very proud of him. So that was a turning point for Juan in this story, in being able to take reality as it comes to him, and also look at possibilities. It's not a story with a happy ending, which is something that I appreciated. It kind of points out to the struggle, not only the struggle that Juan is having with his context, but the internal struggle Juan is facing to make sense of his own sense of despair, grief, longing, cultural relocation, and hopes for the future. So this is what I call a messy process of cultural negotiation and integration. I think the play did well in presenting that. It's not clear-cut, it's not a point in which I have arrived, I have nothing else to do, but a process in which we have to embark continuously. Okay. Then what about trauma? I promise there is something about trauma, because that's the title of my presentation, and actually it's in my class for this summer as well. How does trauma plays into this? Well, there are many definitions of trauma. I like the simplicity that the Greek word for trauma offers. Trauma is trauma. It comes from the Greek trauma, which means wound. If you go to the Center for Treatment and Anxiety of Mood Disorders, it provides a definition for trauma and refers to, beginning of quote, is a response or responses to a distressing event or experience, often the result of an overwhelming amount of stress that exceeds one's ability to cope or integrates the emotions involved with that experience. And then a definition that I really like is provided by Marish, and she says, beginning of quote, any unhealed wound, mental, emotional, physical, sexual, spiritual, that continues to cause problems in daily living or keep us from growing into the fullness of our potential or radiance as human beings. Now, I know that I have heard, and I'm guilty of it as well, that we use the word trauma more often than not, especially in light of having lived through a pandemic. That was traumatic. I'm traumatized. This is traumatic. And so we use the word, I have heard the use of the word constantly, especially through the last 2 or 3 years, and with reason. Yet, according to this definition, not everything that we call trauma is trauma. One component of trauma is that though it's an unhealed wound, and we all have been wounded in life, not all wounds cause problems in terms of our daily living or result on an overwhelming amount of stress and that exceeds our ability to cope or integrate emotions, right? We all experience pain, we all experience suffering in life. We may not experience trauma in life in the way these definitions try to talk about. So to me, one way to understand trauma, if I were to put all these definitions together, is, and then it's more aligned with marriage, it's an unhealed one. So the question is, how do we heal from trauma? You know, what do we do about it? We have been traumatized. Many migrants have been traumatized. It's not only the process of dislocating, relocating, grieving, you know, experiencing cultural negotiation and integration, but also being traumatized, and just, you know, sometimes trauma is the result of individuals' choices. Sometimes the trauma is the result of systemic calamities, right? Oppression, poverty, war, and some people have been exposed to both, you know, microaggressions, and then also systemic forces that traumatize people over and over and over again. So what do we do about it? Well, if we think about trauma as an unhealed wound, how do you heal an unhealed wound? Maybe this sounds too simplistic, and I don't mean it to be, but it helps me to talk about this. And I will say by tending to the wound. How do you heal a wound? By tending to the wound. Now, the second question is, how do you go about tending to a wound? Maybe a deep-seated wound that is not only present in this person, but in generations before, right? It's generational trauma. Well, and I think that's an important question that I hope that we're able to explore and discuss in the context of the course that I have this summer. But I would say that three things that are important for me is that we have to tend to our wounds and the wounds of other people in a way that builds strength, resilience, and agency, right? There are many ways in which we can care for each other's wounds, but to me, being able to build strength, resilience, and agency are really important into tending to the wounds properly. And I have three final thoughts to offer to you, because there are three things that I want to explore throughout my course as you know, ways in which we try to tend to wounds, especially from and in Latino communities. So one of them, which explains what my course is, a pastoral counseling course. I do believe in the Ministry of Pastoral Counseling, which is the ministry in which I have been involved throughout my professional life. But I see the Ministry of Pastoral Counseling as one that seeks to develop people's spiritual intelligence, which goes beyond emotional intelligence. So spiritual intelligence refers to a person's ability to remain grounded, connected to self, oneself, and others, and to nurture hope in the midst of challenges and pain. Now, I would like to think that the Ministry of Pastoral Counseling, or, you know, developing spiritual intelligence is more likely to occur in the context of, you know, this commitment to church and religion. And I do believe that's often the case, at least it has been the case for me. I also understand that sometimes churches and religion have not been conducive to developing spirituality or spiritual intelligence, maybe because their understanding of spirituality is very limited to following rituals or creeds or such. Yet, I believe the Ministry of Pastoral Counseling goes beyond that and really seeks to help people develop spiritual intelligence in a way that allows to be connected to oneself, to other people, to all of creation in ways that nurture hope. The second element here is to redefine trauma or reframe trauma. So, as I mentioned, many people, especially after the pandemic, many people have been traumatized, have suffered trauma. Yet trauma needs not to define us. You know, one way that I like to present this is we may think about ourselves or other people as people who have experienced trauma, as opposed as traumatized people, right? One thing is to define ourselves in relation to the experience, and one thing is to recognize the experience as an aspect of our daily living, or an aspect that has impacted our daily living. And there is a difference between one and the other. So when we talk about trauma, we often times talk about what happened to you, right? Experiences, events that have occurred to you, that have happened to me or to you, and have impacted our perception of self, others, maybe, in negative ways, and maybe sometimes in positive ways, by helping us to develop strength and resilience, and helping us to giving us purpose and meaning in life. Moving away from dominant stories that seek to define people in the context of their struggle and pain, right? And moving away from stories that are problem-ridden. And finally, here is seeking strategies and methodologies which support the processing of trauma and seek to engage the whole person. Much to say about this, but let me just mention that to me, art is wonderful. You probably have heard that art and artistic expression is closely linked to the processing of pain, suffering, and traumatic experiences. It's not coincidence that many of us took to some form of artistic expression through the pandemic. People who never garden start gardening, and all sorts of pictures on Facebook, or people painting, doing all sorts of things, cooking, you name it, even walks in nature, being more connected. There was something that tragedy, taught us about our sense of connection or disconnection, not only to each other as human beings, but through the entire world. I mean, all manifestations of life around the world. So yeah, there is a unique place, a unique role for artistic expression and art in the expression and processing of trauma. And lastly, equally important is building community support. So having a supportive social system increases the possibilities for positive outcomes in the healing from trauma and any kind of healing. And support comes in the form of having a basic understanding of trauma, understanding its effects and symptoms and resources needed to help people, support people who have experienced trauma. Support also comes in the way of recognizing our limitations and recognizing that severe forms of trauma that we might have experienced personally or communally sometimes require the intervention of mental health professionals and support groups. So, there is so much that we can do for ourselves and other people, and there are instances in which we seek help from others professionally to support our growth, to support our processing of trauma. Much more that I can say, but let me stop here and take some of your questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Picos-Lee. We really appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Picos-Lee. I'm so grateful for you. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Picos-Lee with a little hand clap, little emojis. Thank you so much, Professor. So to close this out, I have the blessing of doing the closeout announcements and our closeout thank you. So I want to take a moment. For those of you who don't know, I want to invite you to 3 different ways that you can stay connected with the HSP if you aren't doing so already. First and foremost, we have a vibrant HSP alumni network. Janae Salcedo Kinsey is actually the president of our HSP alumni network. And if you've ever participated in an HSP program, I invite you to join. They're doing events that are geared towards alumni of the program every month, every other month. Just now in January, we had a conversation with author Prisca Dolcas Mojica Rodriguez, author of For Brown Girls with Sharp Edges and Tender Hearts. Beautiful conversation, and we have more events coming forward. So please check out our website, join the alumni network. That's the first way I invite you to connect if you are an alumni of the program. The second way I invite you to connect is by making a donation to the HSP. So we are able to do this work because of the generous donations of folks like you who with $25 a month can really allow programs like these to actually occur month by month. And if you can't do $25 a month, that's fine, $15 a month. Every little bit counts. But these donations, these recurring donations especially, allow us to be able to have this type of public production, this public intellectual production for all sorts of people who may or may not have access to join classes or join grad school, but who still want to learn with our faculty. So please, I invite you as a second way to connect to consider a recurring donation of $25 a month. And if not, $15 a month. The cost, people hear me say this all the time, is the cost of a Chipotle burrito. And you should be supporting your local taquerias. But if you do frequent Chipotle, you can make it penance and donate to the HSP instead. And the third way to connect is by staying connected to our listserv and joining us next month as we welcome Dr. Claudio Carvalhais, who will be doing our HSP Exchange on April 12th, entitled Play and Joy, A Way of Being and Doing Justice. You'll see announcements of that going out next week, but please stay connected to our listserv so you can join. So again, if you haven't already done so and you're an alumni of our program, join the alumni network. If you have the capacity to do so, please start a recurring donation. If you don't have the capacity to do so, but know someone who does, send them our way. And third, please join us next month as we invite another HSP faculty member, Dr. Claudio Carvalhais, who's going to talk about play and joy. So thank you once more, Dr. Picos-Lee, for such an amazing talk. Thank you to our co-host, Palmer Theological Seminary, and Dr. Kimberly Johnson, the Dean of Palmer, who is here with us today. Thank you all for your time, for joining us here. You could have done anything on a Wednesday night, but you chose to be with us. So thank you all, and please stay connected to the HSP. I hope you have a wonderful night.